The sun blazed without mercy across the wide, empty sweep of the American frontier, stirring red dust into wild whirlwinds that danced over the barren plains. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It was the summer of 1880, and the Texas borderlands stretched on forever under a sky so bright it stung the eyes. Heat waves shimmered like molten glass, turning distant mesas into ghostly ships, floating above the earth. Belle Hart pressed her back against the rough pine boards of her late husband's ranch house, willing herself to vanish as voices drifted from the parlor. Her hands, tough from years of chores, trembled as they gripped the faded cloth of her dress, one of only 3 she owned, each patched so many times the original fabric was hard to find. "She's eating us out of house and home." Buck Crow growled, his tone sharp with that cruel edge Belle had come to know too well since Amos Hart's death 6 months earlier. A widow with no prospects, and a figure that Buck paused, letting a sneer drip from every word. "Let's just say she ain't the delicate kind most men around here want." Belle's eyes burned, but no tears fell. Long ago she'd learned that crying only invited more cruelty. Her fuller, softer curves had always fueled Amos Hart's bitter temper. He'd dreamed of a paper-thin bride, like those flaunted in fancy newspapers back east, and punished Belle for not fitting the picture. "Gage Hollis has offered a way out," Buck went on, and a chill shot through her veins at the name. Gage Hollis ruled the biggest cattle spread in 3 counties, known for breaking both men and beasts. "He'll take her off our hands," Buck continued. "Needs a woman to run his house and don't care how she looks." "How much asked, Nora?" Crow, her voice cutting with quick interest. "Enough to wipe out our debts and then some. We need it bad after the drought killed half our herd." Belle's breath caught. They were haggling over her life as if she were a mule to be sold. The humiliation burned like lye, but underneath something fierce awakened a stubborn will to live free. "When does he want her?" Nora asked. "Tomorrow at dawn. He's sending his men." The cold finality of those words snapped Belle into motion. She slipped from the wall with the quiet grace she'd honed over years of dodging Amos's drunken rages. In the cramped room that barely held her narrow cot, she gathered her meager belongings: 2 worn dresses, a hairbrush, missing half its bristles, and a small leather pouch, holding her mother Ada Hart's wedding ring, the one thing Amos hadn't managed to gamble away. Her fingers brushed a faded photograph herself on her wedding day 19, and still believing in promises. Now at 24 she was wiser and far less naive. As dusk bled purple and gold across the plains, Belle finished her plan. She knew the land well, having roamed it whenever Amos's temper turned the house into a trap. A narrow trail cut north toward the open territories. Dangerous for a lone woman, but far safer than the fate Buck and Nora plotted. She waited until the house fell silent, Buck's heavy snores rumbling through the thin walls. Wrapping a threadbare shawl around her shoulders, she eased open the back door. The moon, fat and low, cast long, ragged shadows across the dusty yard. A coyote's mournful call rose, answered by others, until the night itself seemed alive with wild music. Her heart thudded so loud she feared it might rouse the household. Still, she moved careful and quick. At the stable, the horses shifted in their stalls, but she dared not take one horse theft meant hanging, and Buck would hunt her down with the law at his side. Instead, she filled a canteen from the water barrel and snatched what trail food she could find: hardtack biscuits and strips of dried beef meant for the ranch hands. As she turned to leave, a figure stepped from the shadows, heading somewhere Belle. Her breath caught. It was Jed Pike, the young ranch hand, who'd always shown her quiet kindness. His gaze fell on her bundle and the determined set of her jaw. "I have to go," she whispered. "They're going to, I know." Jed's voice was grim. "Heard them talking. Hollis is poison. You're right to run." He pressed something small and cool into her palm, a brass compass. "Head north for Devil's Canyon. There's water there, caves to hide in." After that he shrugged. "The rest is in God's hands." "Why are you helping me?" His eyes clouded with sorrow. "My sister was about your age when Hollis took a liking to her. We found her body 3 months later." He stepped aside, opening her way. "Go, before someone else wakes. And Belle, don't look back." She squeezed his hand in silent thanks, then slipped into the vast dark of the desert. Better to face rattlesnakes and coyotes than the life waiting inside that house. Her boots worn thin bit into the stony ground, but she pressed on. Behind her, the ranch lights dwindled to tiny sparks and vanished. The night air was sharp with sage and dust, and the lonely calls of coyotes followed her into the endless wild. Bellheart drew a long breath of the dry desert air, tasting freedom as if for the very first time. She knew the odds were stacked against her, a lone woman with almost no food or water crossing a hostile land she barely knew. Men who understood every canyon and wash would soon come after her. Yet as she moved forward, something inside her began to change. The shame and humiliation that had haunted every step for years started to fall away. They had tried to sell her like a head of cattle, counting her worth only in dollars and debt. But her own body, the very thing used to wound and belittle her, was now the force carrying her toward a life no one could buy. Each stride became a defiance of every cruel word, every bruise. Each breath shouted her worth into the endless sky. A sudden gust swept grit across her path, twisting into tiny dust devils. Belle tugged her shawl over her nose and narrowed her eyes. She thought of her mother, Ada Hart, gone these 5 years, who had always spoken of unyielding blood. "You've got pioneer blood in you, Belle. Women like us, we survive." The first pale streaks of dawn lit the eastern rim of the world. Belle turned for a final look. Behind her lay the Crow Ranch, where Buck Crow would soon discover her empty room. And when Gage Hollis's riders arrived, they'd find nothing but cold ashes. The hunt would begin soon enough. But for this fragile moment between night and day, Bellheart was free. Scared, exhausted, unsure of tomorrow, yet free. Facing the newborn sun and the unknown territories beyond, she swore a silent oath. Whatever lay ahead, she would never again let herself be bought or sold. The desert spread before her in savage beauty. She kept walking, leaving the life she'd known scattered like dust behind her. Hours later, with the sun blazing overhead, her strength finally gave out. She collapsed at the foot of a towering saguaro, its spiny arms lifted like a lone sentinel in surrender. Her canteen had long since run dry. Her tongue felt thick and cracked as leather. She'd marched through the black hours of night and into a scorching day, putting every mile she could between herself and that house of betrayal. Yet now, as heat shimmered off the rocks, she wondered if she'd only traded one kind of death for another. The irony cut sharp, escaping a brute like Hollis, only to wither in the desert like a fool. A sudden shadow cooled her face. Belle blinked, not realizing her eyes had closed. A horse loomed above her, and on its back a rider blocked out the brutal sun. Fear jolted her. Had Hollis's men found her already? Every muscle tensed, ready to run on sheer will alone. "Easy there," a deep voice said, gentle but firm. "I'm not here to hurt you. The man swung down with the smooth ease of someone born in the saddle. As he stepped clear of the sun, she finally saw him tall and rangy, weathered by hard miles. A pale scar cut from his temple to his jaw, a bright slash on sun-darkened skin. His eyes cold and pale, as winter sky held something she couldn't name. He crouched beside her, moving slow, as if approaching a wild creature. "Name's Clay Boone," he said, unhooking a canteen from his belt. "Looks like you could use a drink." Belle's pride wrestled with the thirst clawing at her throat. Years of bitter lessons warned her that kindness from a man often came with a price. But survival won out. She took the canteen with shaking hands. Slow Clay cautioned as she tipped it to her lips. "Too much at once will make you sick." The water was warm, but it tasted like life itself. Belle forced herself to sip, feeling strength seep back into her limbs. She studied him while she drank. He wore the rough gear of a drifting cowboy, weathered leather chaps, a sweat-stained shirt, a hat seasoned by countless storms. Yet the way he carried himself hinted at military discipline, and his hand never strayed far from the Colt at his hip. "Thank you," she managed, lowering the canteen at last. Clay's sharp eyes swept over her torn dress hem, dust-caked skin, the desperate resolve beneath her dignity. "You running from something or toward something?" he asked. "Does it matter?" she countered. "Suppose not." He sat back on his heels, gaze, scanning the shimmering horizon. "Desert's full of folks headed one way or the other. Only question is whether what's chasing you is worse than what's out ahead." Belle pictured Hollis's cruel grin, the sail her in-laws had plotted, the life that awaited if she failed. "Nothing could be worse than what's behind me," she said, steady and low. Clay studied her, and for a heartbeat she felt as though he could read her soul. Traveling alone. She hesitated, then nodded. There was no hiding it. "That's either brave or foolhardy," he said. "Desperate," she corrected. "I'm desperate." Something softened in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even understanding. He rose, brushing grit from his pants. "Desperate or not, you won't last another hour out here without shelter. There's a watering hole a couple miles north. I was headed there myself." Belle Hart struggled to her feet, the world tilting for a dizzy moment. Pride told her to refuse help, but common sense spoke louder. "I don't have money to pay you back for this," she said. "Didn't ask for any." Clay Boone replied simply. He stepped to his paint mare, a keen-eyed beauty, who flicked her ears toward Belle as if she understood. "Question is, can you ride? I can manage." He gave a curt nod and reached to steady her as she mounted. His touch stayed firm and businesslike, never lingering. Belle was painfully aware of her fuller figure and the way her dress tightened as she settled in the saddle, bracing herself for the usual look of disdain. But Clay's face remained unreadable. He swung up behind her in one smooth motion, reins in hand. The nearness of him made every muscle tighten. Years had taught her that a man's closeness usually meant pain. "Easy," he murmured near her ear. "Belle here's got a smooth gait. No need to sit like a fence post. You'll only wear yourself out." They rode in a silence, broken only by the horse's steady rhythm and the sigh of desert wind through cactus spines. Slowly against her will, Belle's body loosened. Weariness pulled heavier than fear. "You got a name?" Clay asked at last. "Belle Hart," she answered after a pause, choosing honesty. "Widow Hart. Sorry for your loss." A bitter laugh almost escaped her. Sorry. When Amos Hart died, she'd felt many things, chief among them relief. "It was 6 months ago," she said flatly. "Recent enough," he said, the weight in his tone suggesting he understood more than he said. "Where were you hoping to end up north?" Just north. North is a mighty big place. You have kin there, no?" The single word hurt more than she expected. "I don't have people anywhere." They topped a rise, and below lay a small green island in the barren land, a ring of cottonwoods sheltering a natural spring, leaves whispering over cool water. "There," Clay said. "We'll let Belle drink and rest a spell." They descended to the oasis. Beside the spring lay signs of past travelers' stones, shaped into a fire ring, rough logs set for seats. Clay helped her down, his grip firm but detached, guiding her to a log. "Sit. I'll see about food." Belle watched him work with quiet efficiency, caring for the horse, first the mark of a seasoned plainsman. From his saddlebags he produced jerky hardtack and a small pouch of dried fruit. "Not much fancy," he said, setting it out, "but it'll keep you on your feet." They ate in easy silence, broken only by the soft music of trickling water. Belle forced herself to chew slowly, though hunger urged her on. The shade felt like heaven after the merciless sun. "You know Gage Hollis's men will be on your trail," Clay said suddenly. Her head snapped up. How do you know that?" "Passed them about 5 miles back. They were asking after a woman who fits your look." He drank from his canteen, eyes steady. They seemed mighty eager. Fear tightened Belle's throat. "Did you tell them anything?" "Told them I saw a woman heading east toward Lonesome Creek." A faint smile touched his lips. "They didn't strike me as the kind I'd help." "Why?" The word came out in a whisper. "Why lie for me? You don't know who I am, what I've done." Clay stayed quiet a long moment, gaze fixed on the far rim of the desert. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old wounds. "Had a wife once, June Pike, sweetest soul the Lord ever made. When the war came, I left her with my brother to keep her safe." His jaw hardened. "Came back to find she'd been sold off to pay his gambling debts. By the time I tracked her down." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. The scar along his face and the way his fingers brushed the locket under his shirt told the rest. "I'm sorry," Belle said softly, and meant it. "Long time ago," he replied, though the ache behind his words said otherwise. "Point is, I know what men like Hollis do to women they claim to own. I won't stand by for that." The sun tilted toward the horizon, washing the desert in fire and gold. Clay rose, brushing dust from his pants. "We should move on. Too many know this place. They might circle back when they come up empty at Lonesome Creek." She asked, startled. "You mean to walk north on foot with no supplies and Hollis's men sniffing after you? I can't ask you." "You didn't ask," he cut in, already stowing their meal. "I've got business in Fort Defiance. You're welcome to ride along that far. After that?" He shrugged. "Your path's yours." Belle studied him, this scarred stranger, who had appeared like Providence. Trust was something she'd long forgotten how to give. Yet the deep sorrow in his eyes spoke a language she understood. "All right," she said at last. Fort Defiance. Clay handed her a spare trail hat from his gear. "Sun'll kill you faster than any outlaw. Best keep covered." The brim was too large, but she pulled it on with gratitude. Clay helped her back into the saddle, careful and respectful. As twilight stretched across the land, they rode out together, two wounded souls heading north through a wilderness that cared nothing for their troubles. Somewhere behind them, angry men combed the sands for a woman who dared to claim her freedom. Ahead lay danger and the unknown. Yet for the first time in years, Belle felt a flicker of something she thought lost forever. Hope. Fragile as a desert bloom, precious as water, it stirred with every steady hoofbeat, promising that life beyond mere survival might still be hers to claim. The storm struck without warning on their third day together. One heartbeat, the sky lay wide and blue. The next, a wall of red grit rose from the earth, like God's own fury. Clay Boone had sensed trouble, the restless toss of the horses, the sudden hush that made the desert feel like it was holding its breath. "Storm," he shouted over the first roar of wind, yanking his bandana over nose and mouth. "We need cover now!" Belle Hart pressed her cheek to Belle, the mare's warm neck, as the first blast of sand lashed them raw. The world vanished into a raging red blur that clawed at skin and stole every breath. Clay's sure hands guided the horse through the chaos toward a line of rocks he'd spotted earlier. At last they stumbled on a shallow cave barely wide enough for the three of them. Clay pushed Belle inside first, then coaxed the mare in as far as she'd go. Outside, the storm howled like a living beast, sand spinning in wild eddies across the cave's mouth. From his saddlebag, Clay pulled a spare shirt and tore it into strips, handing one to Belle. "Cover your face. Helps keep the dust out." Their fingers brushed calloused, meeting soft, and Belle felt the quiet gentleness in his touch. They sat shoulder to shoulder against the stone wall, the horse blocking most of the storm's wrath. By all rights, the closeness should have scared her. A strange man. A tiny shelter, no escape. Yet Clay kept a careful inch of space, as if that line were sacred. "How long will it last?" she asked through the makeshift mask. "Could be hours. Summer storms don't play by rules." He ran a calming hand along the mare's neck. "We were lucky to find this hollow." Lucky. Belle turned the word over in her mind. 3 days ago, she'd been half dead in the wasteland. Now she was alive because of this scarred drifter. In that short time, she'd known more simple kindness than in 5 long years of marriage. The storm screamed louder, making the rock tremble. The mare whickered, but Clay's low voice steadied her, the same voice he used to soothe Belle when nightmares dragged her awake. In the dim light, she watched him. A man who asked nothing, shared everything, and kept silent vigil while she slept. Why Fort Defiance, she asked at last, needing words to drown out the storm's rage. "Got word my brother might be there," he said after a pause. His hand brushed the scar along his cheek. "Haven't seen him since I came back from the war and found June gone. The brother who—" She stopped, sensing the ache behind the question. The same. No anger, only deep fatigue. "Cole Briggs was always weak for cards and whiskey. I don't hold it against him anymore. Blame doesn't bring the dead back." Silence settled heavy with memories neither dared name. A week ago, Belle had been a caged soul waiting to be sold. Now she sheltered with a man who'd lost his own heart to greed and cruelty, each of them finding refuge from more than just the wind. Hours passed before the gale eased. When they finally stepped outside, the land had been remade. Dunes, shifted gullies, filled the setting sun, painting the new shapes in molten gold and rose. "We'll have to watch our bearings," Clay said, scanning the changed horizon. "A storm like that can erase every trail." As if to prove his words, the distant beat of hooves reached their ears. Clay's hand went straight to his revolver, pushing Belle behind him. Through the thinning dust, 5 riders emerged, men with the deliberate pace of hunters. Gage Hollis's men, Belle breathed, recognizing the black-hatted leader. Clay drew her deeper into the rocks. "Stay quiet. They don't see us." The posse passed within 50 yards, their voices riding the wind. "Storm wiped out the tracks," one complained. "They could be anywhere," another grumbled. "Mr. Hollis wants her found," the leader snapped. Doesn't care if we turn over every rock from here to Mexico. Nobody makes a fool of him. Awful lot of trouble for one woman, a third muttered. The black hat wheeled his horse hard, making it rear. You questioning Hollis's orders? No, sir. Just saying. Then shut it and keep searching. She's out here somewhere, probably not alone. No woman lasts this long in the desert by herself. The riders pushed on, swallowed by the dusk. Belle exhaled the breath she hadn't known she held. They'll be back, Clay said grimly. Men like that don't quit. That night they made a cold camp, no fire to betray them. They shared a little water and jerky sitting close against the desert's sudden chill. I'm putting you in danger, Belle whispered. You should leave me at the next settlement. You can... What? His voice stayed calm but firm. Walk into Fort Defiance on foot with Hollis's men right behind. They'd have you before you could blink. This isn't your fight. Maybe not. He paused, the fireless dark wrapping them both. But I've run from too many fights already. Lost too much by not standing when it mattered. Belle felt tears sting her eyes. When had anyone last stood for her with no price attached? I don't know how to repay you. I'm not asking for payment, he said roughly. Just want to see you safe. Is that so hard to believe? It was given her past. Yet Clay had proved different every mile, steady hands on the reins, when she faltered a voice, instead of a grasp, when nightmares came. Tell me about June, she said softly, if only to keep the night from swallowing them. In the darkness, he shifted. She had hair like spun gold, always smelled of lavender, even out here, where nothing sweet grows. Could sing like an angel and flare up like a prairie fire when riled. A quiet, sorrowful chuckle. Tiny thing barely to my shoulder, but braver than 10 men. When I left for the war, she promised to wait. And she did, Clay Boone said quietly. It was me who failed her. You couldn't have known, Belle Hart answered. Couldn't I? Bitterness edged his words. I knew what Cole Briggs was, knew his vices. I should have made better plans, should have... His voice faded into the night. Belle reached for him in the dark, found his hand, and gave it a gentle squeeze. He went still, then turned his palm upward, letting their fingers entwine for a brief, steady moment before letting go. She was blessed, Belle said softly, to have someone love her that deeply. Clay gave a low, rough laugh. Was she? That love didn't save her in the end. Silence stretched between them, heavy with memories no desert night could soothe. A coyote's mournful cry rose in the distance, answered by its pack predators calling across the black, like Gage Hollis's men hunting through the dark. Dawn came too soon, bringing new peril. As Clay packed their meager gear, he spotted dust clouds boiling on the southern horizon, riders closing fast. We need to ride hard, he said, boosting Belle into the saddle. If we can reach Devil's Ridge by nightfall, we might shake them in the canyons. The day blurred into heat and motion. Belle the mare carried them tirelessly across shifting ground, flat stretches of sand, sudden ridges of rock. Twice they dismounted to lead her through passages too dangerous to ride. Thorns and jagged stone shredded Belle Hart's dress, but she barely noticed. Survival had burned away any thought of propriety. At midday, they paused to rest and ration their shrinking supply of water. As Belle drank sparingly, she caught Clay studying her with a look she couldn't quite read. What is it? She asked, uneasy. You're stronger than you know, he said simply. Most folks would have quit by now. I've had practice surviving things meant to break me, she replied. Understanding passed between them, two souls marked by different hells, yet recognizing the same scars. Clay reached out, brushed a loose strand of hair from her face with unexpected gentleness. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but it warmed her more than years of marriage ever had. By late afternoon, Devil's Ridge loomed ahead, a jagged labyrinth of red rock and shadowed chasms. But as they neared its twisting entrance, disaster struck. Belle the mare stumbled her foreleg, dropping into a hidden hole, pitching both riders hard to the ground. The air shot from Belle Hart's lungs as she hit. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the mare's pained whinny and Clay's sharp curse. Her leg, Clay said grimly, running practiced hands over the mare. Not broken, but she's lame. Can't carry us both. The distant dust cloud of pursuers now stood maybe 2 miles off and closing fast. "Leave me," Belle said fiercely, forcing herself upright despite the ache in her ribs. "Take Belle and go." Clay looked at her as if she'd lost her senses. "Not happening. I can't help you if you're dead." He straightened, decision made. "Then we go on foot into the canyons. Horses will slow us there." He stripped the essentials from the saddle with swift efficiency. "Can you run?" Belle nodded, every muscle screaming. Clay looped a quick lead for the injured mare so she could limp behind. Then he gripped Belle's hand. "Stay close. These canyons are a maze, easy to get lost, easier to get trapped." They plunged into Devil's Ridge as the sun bled toward the horizon, painting the walls in deep fire. Behind them, the drum of hooves grew steadily louder. Belle's heart hammered as Clay guided her through the twisting maze with the confidence of someone who'd hidden in these rocks before. "Through here," he said, steering them into a slit barely wide enough to pass. They turned sideways to squeeze through Belle the mare, struggling but following. The narrow way opened into a secret hollow where a thin spring bubbled over stone. "Old Apache Hideout," Clay whispered, already sweeping away their tracks. "Found it years back. If luck's with us, they'll ride right past." Night gathered as they waited in taut silence. Voices of men and the echo of horses bounced off the canyon walls, sometimes frighteningly close, sometimes far. They found the mare's trail, a voice called startlingly near. They went into the canyons. "Split up," barked the leader. "Check every passage." "They're in here somewhere." Belle pressed flat against cold rock, hardly daring to breathe. Beside her, Clay stood poised, gun ready. The injured mare hung her head silent as stone. Footsteps scraped closer. A shadow crossed their hiding place. Belle's hand clutched Clay's in the darkness. "This is it. Fight or die." But the searcher turned aside at the last moment, called off by his companions. The echoes faded until finally even the night wind swallowed them. They stayed motionless another hour before Clay eased his stance. "They'll camp at the canyon mouth," he murmured. "Wait for daylight to comb it again. But there's another way out if you can push on." Exhaustion dragged at every bone, but Belle met his gaze and nodded. "I can keep moving." The moon had climbed high, casting silver over the canyon walls and etching every line of Clay Boone's scarred face. Belle Hart watched him as they readied for another night of travel, a man who had risked everything for a woman he'd met by chance. Her chest tightened with something that was equal parts fear and wonder. "Thank you," she whispered. Clay met her gaze, and in those pale eyes she caught the glint of a feeling that matched the stirrings in her own heart, unexpected, inconvenient, but undeniable. "We're not safe yet," he said, voice rough with more than caution. Still, as they moved deeper into the dark canyons with Belle, the mare limping faithfully behind, Belle felt safer than she had in years. Not because of the stone walls around them, but because of the man beside her. Out here with danger at their backs and stars overhead, she was rediscovering something she thought dead the ability to trust, maybe even to love. The hidden canyon where they sheltered was like another world sculpted by wind and rare water into secret chambers of red rock. For 2 days they waited there, letting Gage Hollis's riders wear themselves out, combing the ridges. A small spring gave them water, and Clay had managed to snare a rabbit, their first hot meal in days. Night returned, bringing a sharp desert chill. They sat by a low fire, built deep enough inside the canyon that its glow wouldn't betray them. The injured mare stood nearby, her leg mending, but still tender. Overhead, a full moon poured silver light into the narrow cleft. Tell me about before, Clay said quietly, feeding a stick to the flames. Before Amos Hart. Belle drew the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Clay had pressed it on her, making do with only his coat. Not much to tell. My folks, Ada and Silas Hart, worked a little farm in Missouri. Good people, hard workers. Fever took them both when I was 18. I'm sorry, he said. She gave a small shrug, an old wound, long scarred. Amos came calling soon after. He seemed kind, steady. The farm carried debt, and he promised to take care of it. I thought I was lucky, a young woman with nothing, and here was a man willing to marry me and save the land. A bitter laugh escaped. I thought wrong. He wasn't kind, Clay said, more statement than question. No. Belle stared into the fire. His kindness ended the night we wed, when he saw my figure wasn't what he imagined. Said I'd tricked him, courting in winter when heavy coats hid the truth. Clay's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent, letting her speak. For 5 years I heard it, too much, too soft, too round. He carried pictures of mail-order brides in his papers, all delicate little birds. He wanted something breakable, not a woman who could work a field beside him. His loss, Clay said simply. Belle looked up, startled by the quiet conviction in his voice. Most men would agree with him that I'm not desirable. Most men are fools. His eyes held hers. Strength is beautiful. Endurance is beautiful. You've got both. The words landed deeper than she expected, and she blinked away sudden tears. What about you after June Pike? Clay stirred the fire with a stick, taking his time. I drifted. Cattle drives, railroad crews, scouting for the army. Anything to keep moving, to keep from thinking. The scar his hand touched, the line on his cheek that was Tucson. A man spoke ill of June. I couldn't let it pass. He had friends and a knife, just added to the scars I already carried from the war. Belle understood. Some scars lived under the skin, hidden from sight. Do you ever wonder if it gets easier? Living with ghosts, she asked. Some days it feels that way, he said. Then I hear a laugh that sounds like hers, catch a whiff of lavender, and I'm right back at her grave. He paused, voice softening. But lately the ghosts seem quieter. Their eyes met across the fire. Days of danger and shared silence had stripped them of all pretense, leaving only raw honesty. Out here, far from society's rules, the old boundaries felt thin. I should check the canyon entrance, Clay said, suddenly rising. Make sure Hollis's men are truly gone. As he passed, Belle caught his hand. Stay, she whispered. Please. I'm tired of being alone with my thoughts. He stopped, then sank back beside her, closer this time, close enough that she caught the scent of leather, and Sage felt the heat of his body in the cold air. They sat wordless, listening to the fire's soft crackle and the distant hush of water. Belle. He hesitated. I need you to know I'm not asking for anything, she said, her voice steady. I've had enough of men who think they own me. I just want to sit here with you and feel human again. The tension in his shoulders eased. Slowly his arm slipped around her. The touch was gentle, a question waiting for her answer. Belle leaned in, resting against the solid beat of his heart. You're trembling, Clay murmured. I'm not cold. I know. His arm drew her a little closer. I know. They stayed that way, as the fire burned low two worn souls, finding quiet in each other's presence. Belle spoke of small dreams books Amos had sold the ocean she still longed to see. Clay shared fragments of his own past. His mother Lila Boone's apple pie, the dog he'd had as a boy, the scent of Kentucky grass after a summer rain. As the moon slid across the canyon sky, Belle found her head on his shoulder, his fingers combing gently through her hair. The tenderness almost hurt with its purity, so unlike anything she'd known. "We should sleep," Clay said at last, though he made no move to pull away. "Long ride tomorrow if we're to reach Fort Defiance." Belle lifted her head, meeting his gaze in the soft silver light. In the dying glow of the fire, Clay Boone's face was a map of hard angles and shadow, but his eyes had softened to a quiet light. Without thinking, Belle Hart reached up and traced the long scar along his cheek. He went perfectly still under her touch. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Not anymore," he said, voice low and rough. Other things cut deeper. She knew those kinds of wounds. Her palm cupped his face thumb, brushing the raised seam of old pain. "You're a good man, Clay Boone. You don't know that." "I do." Her words came steady. She could see the struggle in his eyes, desire wrestling with honor, need fighting the habits of restraint. "A bad man would have taken advantage days ago," she continued. "A bad man wouldn't have risked his life for a stranger. A bad man wouldn't look at me the way you do." His breath caught. "And how am I looking at you like I matter? Like I'm worth saving? You are." The words came fierce, almost angry. "God damn anyone who made you believe otherwise." The raw protectiveness in his voice made her heart race. Amos Hart had once struck her for a single curse, yet Clay's oath felt like a shield, not a threat. "Clay," she breathed. Something in her tone warned him, and he drew back slightly. "We can't," he said hoarsely. "I won't take anything from you. I'm not that fragile girl who married Amos Bell cut in. This isn't fear or gratitude. I want to feel alive again, to know I still have the right to choose." The moon slipped behind a bank of clouds, plunging the canyon into near darkness. She felt his inner war in the tautness of his body, heard it in his ragged breathing. When he finally spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. "If we do this, it changes everything. Things have already changed." Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head. Their lips met, gentle, searching, a question asked and answered. Nothing like the rough claiming she'd known in marriage. Belle's hands slid into his hair, holding him close, as years of fear and loneliness cracked open inside her. When at last they parted, both were breathless. Clay rested his forehead against hers, palms framing her face with impossible care. "Belle," he said her name, a prayer and a promise. "I know," she whispered. "I know." They stayed wrapped together as the fire dwindled to embers, neither pushing beyond the simple truth of that embrace. Belle felt the barricades around her heart crumble, letting in both terror and hope. She had vowed never to trust again, never to let a man close enough to hurt her. But Clay wasn't like the rest. He was scarred and remade by pain as she was, and maybe that was why this felt less like falling and more like coming home. "What happens when we reach Fort Defiance?" she asked against his chest. "I don't know." His honesty was another quiet gift, no false promises, no claim of ownership. "But I know I can't just ride away and leave you for Gage Hollis to hunt. He won't quit. Then we keep moving." He tipped her chin so she could see the resolve in his eyes. "Together, if you'll have me. I'm done letting the past steer my life." 100 reasons warned her this was folly. They barely knew each other. He still carried June Pike's ghost. She was fleeing a curse that might never lift. But under the cold desert stars, none of it mattered. Together she agreed, sealing the vow with another kiss. When dawn painted the canyon walls in rose and gold, they were still entwined, having slept in fits and starts against each other's warmth. Belle the mare nickered softly, waking them. They parted reluctantly, knowing the night had changed them. As they readied to leave, Clay caught her hand. No regrets. She laced her fingers with his. None. They stepped from the hidden canyon into a world scrubbed clean by morning light. Tracks of Hollis's riders trailed south they'd given up for now. Belle knew this fight wasn't finished, but she felt stronger than she had in years. Not because a man shielded her. She'd learned how protection could become possession. This was different. She had chosen this man, this path, this chance at happiness. The sun climbed hard and bright as they journeyed on their hands, brushing now and then, two scarred hearts carrying hope toward the unknown. By noon, Fort Defiance rose ahead like a dust-worn jewel. Adobe and timber buildings clustered around the old army post, the streets alive with mule teams, hawkers, and the clang of blacksmith hammers. It was the sort of town where folks asked no questions if you had coin to spend. Belle kept her hat low as they entered. The mare's limp was worse after the hard push. Clay led them past saloons already rowdy, past merchants hawking everything from rifles to fancy Eastern dresses. Belle felt the weight of men's stares and tensed. Easy Clay murmured, "We'll get supplies and find a quiet place to rest." But trouble found them first. 3 trail-dusted men stepped out of the Silver Dollar Saloon, eyes sharp and mean. Belle's heart sank. She knew the lead man, Finn Red, one of Gage Hollis's most loyal guns. Well, Finn drawled, his hand hovering near his revolver. "Looks like Mr. Hollis's property decided to take a stroll." Clay eased a half-step forward, placing himself squarely between Belle and the threat. "The lady belongs to no one." "Move along. That's where you're wrong, friend." Finn's smile was cold as iron. She was bought and paid for. Mr. Hollis don't take kindly to thieves. The dusty street began to fill with onlookers, men drifting from card games, faces peering from windows, eager for a show. Belle felt every eye on them. "I wasn't sold," she said, her voice steady despite the fear pounding in her veins. "You can't sell a person like cattle. Can't we?" One of Finn's men barked a laugh. "Her kin took the money quick enough." "Sounds legal to me." Clay's reply was soft, but carried steel. "In my book, any man who trades in human souls deserves what's coming. Step aside." Finn's smile turned into a snarl. "You threatening us, stranger, just stating facts." The tension stretched taut as a drawn bow. Belle watched rough hands slide toward gun butts and felt the hot edge of violence hanging over the dusty street. Before tempers could explode, a cool, commanding voice sliced through the tense air. "That's enough, gentlemen." A tall woman stepped from the thinning crowd, dressed head to toe in black, her posture sharp as a drawn blade. Power rolled off her like heat from sun-baked rock. Finn Red stiffened and touched his hat. "Miss Rose, this ain't your concern." "Everything in my town is my concern," Rose Carver said evenly. Her keen gaze swept the standoff and came to rest on Belle Hart. "Especially when men think they can bully a woman in my street. Bad for business." "She belongs to Mr. Hollis Finn," shot back. "Does she now?" Rose's smile was thin as a knife. "Show me a territorial bill of sale signed and sealed. Otherwise you're 3 hired guns threatening a lady, and that's something I don't tolerate." Color climbed Finn's neck. "You know Hollis don't need papers. Then he's got no claim." Rose shifted her eyes to Clay, Boone, and Belle. "You two looking for a room?" Clay read the undertow fast. "We are. Head to the Desert Rose boarding house 2 streets over. Tell Hattie I sent you." She turned back to the gunman. "And you 3 will ride out. Now." Finn's jaw tightened. Hollis won't forget this. "I'm counting on it," Rose said coolly. "Give him my regards." The hired guns backed off their glares, promising the fight wasn't finished. As the onlookers drifted away, Rose stepped closer to Belle. "Takes grit to stand your ground. But grit alone won't keep Gage Hollis off your trail." "Why help us?" Belle asked. Rose's eyes softened just a shade. "Let's say I have no patience for men who think they own women. Hollis tried muscling in on my business once. I sent him packing, minus 2 fingers. With that, she turned and melted back into the street's shadows. "Keep sharp," she called over her shoulder. "This town's full of eyes, and not all of them friendly." The Desert Rose proved true to its name, plain but spotless, run by a broad-shouldered widow named Hattie Briggs. She gave them a long, measuring look before ushering them in. "Miss Rose sent you, then you're in deep water. Come on. Hot meal and a bath first, talk later." The promise of soap and steaming water nearly undid Belle. She lingered in the copper tub until her skin prickled, scrubbing away dust and fear. The memory of Clay's canyon kiss felt like a fragile dream, something too gentle for a world that could turn deadly on a dime. When she dressed, Hattie handed her a clean, well-kept calico gown. "Belonged to my girl," she said gruffly. "She won't be needing it where she's gone." Belle didn't ask if that meant death or distance. On the frontier, either could be final. The dress hugged her curves, but felt like pure luxury. Downstairs, Clay waited in a fresh shirt, his face lighting when she entered, before settling into the guarded calm he wore in public. "You look," he cleared his throat, "better rested." Belle smiled faintly and sat across from him. "Hattie says a stage runs north to Colorado every week. Next one's due in 3 days." "That's good," Clay said. Then he caught the nuance. "You said there's a stage, not that we'll take it. You've got family to find," Belle answered quietly. "I won't have you walking away from that for me." Belle. She reached across the table, brushed his hand, then pulled back. "Find Cole Briggs. Make your peace. I'll manage." His jaw hardened. "Mitchell's men are already on every road. You heard, Finn? They know you're here." Almost on cue, Hattie set down bowls of stew and cornbread. 3 more of Hollis's boys just rode in, she warned. "Camping outside town, watching the roads. Whatever you plan it careful." They ate in taut silence, each bite heavy with the trap closing around them. Belle had dreamed that Fort Defiance meant safety. Instead, it felt like a larger snare. That night, Clay walked her to her room. In the quiet hallway, he caught her arm gently. "Don't ask me to leave you here alone," he said. "Not with those buzzards circling. And don't ask me to be the reason you lose your one chance with family," she countered. "You said Cole might be here. You need to know." He studied her in the lamplight, a ghost of a smile beneath the worry. "You're the most hard-headed woman I've ever met. I learned it the hard way." His hand rose to her cheek, thumb tracing her skin. "What happened in the canyon was real," she finished. "And so is the danger you've brought me," he said. "You think I care about danger?" His voice dropped fierce. "You think I wouldn't face 100 Hollises for—" He faltered, for what she whispered. Instead of answering, he kissed her no gentle question this time, but a deep, urgent promise. Belle clung to him, letting the world fall away until breath itself became a memory. When they finally parted, Clay rested his forehead to hers. 2 days, he said. "Give me 2 days to find Cole. Then we ride out together." She saw the fear in his eyes, fear of losing again. How could she refuse? 2 days, she agreed. Morning brought a new edge of danger. Hollis's riders were everywhere, scattering coin and questions. Belle kept to her room, peering through the lace curtains, while Hattie brought meals, and whispered scraps of news about Clay's hunt for his brother. "That man of yours is shaking the whole town," Hattie Briggs said with a sly smile as she set down a tray. "Must be mighty important." "He's not my man, Belle," Hart answered automatically. Hattie gave a knowing snort. "Could have fooled me, the way Clay Boone watches you when he thinks nobody's looking. That's a man with a stake in his heart, whether he's said the words or not." Later that afternoon, a soft knock stirred the quiet. Belle's breath caught, but when she opened the door, it was only Rose Carver, the sharp-eyed woman who had cut off Finn Red and his crew yesterday. "Thought you might like some company," Rose said, stepping inside with a grace that spoke of strength. Her eyes, cool and shrewd, suggested more than a friendly visit. They sat by the window sipping tea Hattie had brought up. Rose studied Belle with unsettling intensity before speaking. "You're not what I expected. Gage Hollis usually chases women who fold easy. Maybe that's why you bolted," maybe Belle admitted. "I've had girls come through my place who started like you, sold out by kin, cornered by circumstance," Rose went on. "Some found their backbone and built a life. Others," she lifted one shoulder, "others just traded one cage for another." "Why tell me this? Because you've got a choice to make. That man of yours." Rose's mouth curved faintly when Belle bristled. "Don't bother denying it. He'd burn the world to keep you safe. Question is, what are you willing to do for him?" Belle frowned. "I don't follow. Hollis won't quit, even if you make it clear to Colorado. Pride's in it now. But there are ways to make a man like that back off legal ways if you're smart." "What kind of ways?" Rose's eyes gleamed. "Sometimes the best cage is the one you build yourself. Marriage, for instance. A married woman has protections a widow doesn't, especially if her husband's the sort who'll fight for what's his." Heat rushed to Belle's cheeks. "Clay and I, we haven't." "Haven't you, Rose?" Rose smoothly skirts, whispering. "Think it over. Judge Eli Frost marries folks every Saturday. Fair price." When she left, Belle sat motionless, the word marriage echoing like distant thunder. Once it had meant chains and bruises, but marriage to Clay. The thought was both frightening and strangely bright. That evening, Clay returned his expression carved from grief. "I found someone who knew Cole Briggs. Said he was working the copper mine 6 months back. There was a cave-in. 12 men never came out." Belle's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry." He nodded, accepting the comfort while his eyes carried a quiet devastation. They ate in the boarding house dining room, food forgotten between them. "I'll visit the grave come morning," he said. "Say my goodbyes. Then we leave." "Clay?" Belle steadied herself. "Rose Carver came today. She suggested something marriage, as a shield from Hollis's claim." He looked stunned, then searching a flash of hope breaking through the grief. "Marriage," he repeated slowly. "It was only a thought. I know it's a lot to ask." "Is it?" His voice deepened. "Is it really too much? Belle, tell me you feel nothing between us. Tell me that kiss in the canyon meant nothing." She couldn't. Lies had cost her too much already. "I'm broken," she whispered. "I still flinch at shadows. I carry another man's scars on my soul, and I'm a man who failed to save the woman he loved," Clay said quietly, "who drags ghosts wherever he goes. Maybe that's why we fit. Maybe two broken souls can build something whole." Tears welled hot and unbidden. "I'm scared. So am I." He enclosed her hands in his thumbs, tracing soft circles. "But I'm more scared of losing you." The moment trembled like a candle flame. Then a door slammed open, and May Knox, one of Hattie's serving girls, burst in, pale and breathless. "Hollis is here," she gasped. "Just rode in with 20 men. They're coming this way." Outside the desert. Sky turned black in an instant. Lightning cracked, and thunder rolled like cannon fire. A hard, blinding rain pelted the town, drumming the windows until the glass rattled. Belle and Clay slipped out the back of the Desert Rose as Hollis's riders stormed the front. They fought through the downpour to an abandoned miner's shack on the town's edge, the storm hammering the tin roof like 100 rifles. "We can't stay here," Clay said, checking his revolver yet again. Water pooled on the dirt floor and dripped from warped rafters. "Once the storm lets up, they'll search every outbuilding." Belle wrung out her soaked skirt, shivering. The shack was nothing but 4 leaking walls and a roof, but it was shelter for the moment. "Hattie mentioned a freight wagon leaving at dawn," she said through chattering teeth. "Headed to the railroad camp. We could hide in the load." "Too risky," Clay replied, draping his coat over her shoulders despite her protest. "Hollis will have men watching every trail." Another flash of lightning etched the worry in his face. They had crossed deserts and canyons only to be cornered like prey. "Maybe I should face him," Belle said suddenly, voice low. "Stop this before anyone else gets hurt." Clay spun toward her, eyes blazing. "Don't." His voice was raw. "Don't even think it. He won't stop. You heard Rose. His pride's burning now. How many will pay because I ran?" He closed the space between them in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders with firm gentleness. "You're not going back to him. Not while I'm breathing." And when you stop breathing, she asked, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "What happens if Hollis's gunmen put a bullet in you because of me, Belle?" Hart asked, her voice a raw tremor in the dark. "Then I'll die." "Free, Clay." Boone answered, fierce and steady. "Die fighting for something worth the fight for the first time since Sarah." His voice cracked on the name. "First time I've felt alive in years. You did that, Belle. You reminded me what life's for." The rain hammered harder, drowning their words until they had to draw close just to hear. Belle pressed against his chest, his arms wrapping her in the only warmth left to find. "I'm not worth dying for," she whispered into the damp fabric of his shirt. "Let me be the judge of that." His calloused fingers threaded gently through her soaked hair. "Besides, who says anyone's dying? We've come this far." They stood that way for long, rain-soaked minutes, her cheek against the steady drum of his heart. Strange how safe she felt in a leaking shack, hunted yet far safer than she'd ever felt as Amos Hart's wife. A cannon blast crack of thunder jolted them both. In the silence that followed, a new sound carried through the storm horses galloping hard. Clay pushed Belle behind him, hand flashing to his revolver. They held their breath as the riders thundered past, searching for drier ground. The danger wasn't gone. Come dawn, the hunt would begin again. But for now, they had a fragile reprieve. "Tell me about the ocean," Clay said suddenly. Belle blinked. "What? You once said you dreamed of seeing it. Tell me." Realization warmed her chest. He was trying to chase the fear away. "I used to read about it," she murmured. "How it goes on forever, blue folding into blue. They say you can taste salt on the air, hear the waves even in your sleep. The Pacific's not so far from Colorado," he mused. "We could make it in a few weeks if we push hard." She asked softly. "You think I'd let you meet your first ocean alone?" A quiet grin colored his voice. "Somebody's got to keep you from walking straight in hypnotized by all that blue." Despite everything, Belle laughed. "I can swim a Missouri pond, but an ocean's different. Waves tall as houses, currents that can drag you clear out to sea." His arms tightened around her. "Then you'll need someone who cares if you come back to shore." The meaning hung heavy between them. Belle turned to face him, lightning flashing to reveal the unguarded intensity in his eyes. "Clay," she breathed, and his mouth found hers. This kiss was fierce and urgent, threaded with the knowledge that tomorrow might never come. Belle clung to him, fingers in his wet hair, needing to feel life instead of fear. He answered with the same hunger, guiding her gently back against the rough log wall, his body a warm shield against the dripping roof. Belle, he groaned against her lips. "We shouldn't." "Please," she whispered. "I need to choose this. I need to feel alive to know this moment belongs to me." He hesitated, then kissed her again, slower, reverent. "If we do this, it changes everything." "Things already changed," she said. They made a bed of their damp coats on the cabin floor, the storm outside pounding like a wild heartbeat. Clay's touch was patient, each kiss a question she could answer or refuse. Where Amos' heart had taken Clay gave. Where there had been pain now, there was discovery and mutual need. Every breath and caress felt like a vow unspoken, but sure. When he whispered her name like a prayer and held her as if she were rare and unbreakable, something inside her long wounded began to heal. Later they lay wrapped in each other as the rain softened. Clay traced slow circles on her back, and for the first time, Belle tasted real contentment. "No regrets?" he asked quietly, echoing the canyon's memory. "None," she said with certainty. "Whatever comes tonight makes it better." He kissed her temple. "Then I've got one more reason to keep us alive." She studied his face in the dim light. "Do you really think we can make it past Hollis, past all of this?" "I think we've already crossed worse. You survived a marriage meant to break you. I survived a war and losing everything I loved. And we found each other in the middle of nowhere. If that isn't a miracle, I don't know what is." Belle managed a small smile. "Though I notice you left out your terrible sense of direction, we'd be in Colorado already, if not for that shortcut through Devil's Ridge. That shortcut saved us," he protested. After leading us straight into Hollis's lap, she teased. He chuckled low in his throat. "Woman, you're never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never," she said, and kissed him again, sealing the promise as the storm outside finally began to fade. They spoke in hushed tones as the storm drifted east, sketching dreams they both knew the dawn might wash away. Clay Boone pictured a small ranch on the California coast, where the breeze carried salt and wild roses. Belle Hart described rows of bright vegetables, shelves of books to read at sunset, a quiet life, stitched with peace. Neither dared mention the armed posse waiting back in town, or Gage Hollis, who still claimed her like property. For a little while, they let themselves believe love could root even in the hardest desert soil. As the sky lightened from black to pewter, they pulled on their damp clothes and braced for whatever waited. Something unshakable had settled between them, stronger than fear. About what Rose Carver suggested, Clay said at the cabin door, turning her gently to face him. "Marriage. We don't have to talk about it. Yes, we do. Not because of Hollis or the law," he went on, "but because I want to. Somewhere between finding you half dead in the wasteland and holding you through this storm, I went and fell in love with you." Belle's breath caught. "I know it's fast," he added. "I know we're both carrying ghosts. But when I think about tomorrow, all I want is to face it with you." He drew a small silver ring from his pocket, turquoise, glinting in the pale light. "Found this yesterday, while asking about Cole Briggs. It isn't fancy, but—" "Yes," she blurted, startling them both. "Yes, Clay Boone. I'll marry you. Today, if Judge Eli Frost can stand before us, though not because of Hollis. Because I love you. Because you see me and still choose me." The ring slid onto her finger, as though it had always been there. "You're worth everything," he said, simply. They sealed their vow with a kiss in the doorway, sunrise blazing over a world scrubbed clean by rain. Danger still waited in Fort Defiance, But Belle felt wrapped in a new kind of armor, Clay's love, and her own resolve. They walked hand in hand into the washed gold morning, ready to claim a future that might carry them all the way to that ocean ranch. Whatever Hollis planned, she was done running in fear. By sunset, blood-red light streaked the desert. They had returned to town after the storm, finding brief refuge with Rose Carver while waiting for Judge Frost to ride back from his circuit. But Gage Hollis's patience had snapped. Inside the modest adobe chapel, Clay paused to pray at the altar, while Belle sat in a rear pew, her new ring catching the stained glass glow. Peace lasted only moments. The doors slammed open. "There she is!" Finn Red's shout cracked the quiet. He charged in with 5 armed riders. "Thought you could hide behind church walls." Clay spun, shoving Belle behind a heavy wooden bench as gunfire exploded. Bullets chewed through timber and plaster. Rainbow shards of glass rained from shattered windows. "Stay low," he barked, firing back with deadly speed. Yet he was 1 man against 6. Belle crouched on the floor, heart hammering. Guilt pressed like a weight of iron. This fight was for her because of her. But fury burned hotter than fear. These men thought they could hunt and own her forever. A strangled cry, Clay staggered, clutching a bleeding shoulder. Still he kept firing, but his aim faltered. "Just hand over the woman!" Finn. Red jeered. "No reason to die for spoiled goods?" Belle's vision sharpened to a hard red edge. She spotted Clay's spare revolver, where it had slid across the floor. Samuel Amos Hart had forced her to clean weapons often enough. The grip felt disturbingly natural. "Belle, don't." Clay gasped. But she was already moving. Years of dodging Amos's fists had taught her speed and cunning. She rolled clear of the pew and squeezed off a shot. The first bullet ricocheted wide, the second tore into a gunman's thigh. He went down, screaming. "The woman bites back," someone yelled. Gunfire roared in answer. Belle dove behind the altar as splinters rained. From there she glimpsed Clay, pale, but still fighting to reload one-handed. Their eyes met his, full of pain and fierce pride. Then Gage Hollis filled the doorway, massive and cold-eyed. He took in the wounded men, then fixed on her Mrs. "Hart," he said, his deep voice slicing through the chaos. "This foolishness ends now. You've cost me time, money, and now men," Gage Hollis thundered, stepping over broken glass and splintered pews. "Come quiet, Belle, and maybe I'll let your friend keep breathing." "Go to hell, Belle." Hart spat, her voice carrying like a rifle shot. Hollis's face hardened. "I paid for you. Your brother-in-law's debts are gone because of me. You belong. I belong to no one," she cut in, the words tearing free like they'd been caged for years. "Not to you, not to Amos Hart, not to any man who thinks a woman can be bought like a sack of grain." Her revolver cracked. The bullet smashed into the doorframe inches from his skull. Hollis cursed and dove aside. "Take them both," he roared. "Dead or alive, I don't care." Gunfire erupted like a summer hailstorm. Clay Boone, bleeding but unbowed, moved with a soldier's deadly grace. The tender man who had held her through the storm now fought like a lightning-struck warrior. Still, the odds were crushing. Then new thunder rolled, this time from shotguns. The side door banged open, and Rose Carver strode in black skirts, snapping like banners, a double-barreled scattergun braced to her shoulder. "Nobody shoots up my town and walks out whole," she barked, eyes blazing. Behind her came half a dozen of her women, armed and fierce as any cavalry charge. Buckshot roared, and Hollis's men faltered. Two went down hard, another bolted into the dark. But Finn Red held his ground, and Hollis himself looked ready to burn the world. "You meddling witch!" Hollis spat. "I make it my business," Rose snapped back, thumbing fresh shells into her gun. "Fort Defiance is rough, but we don't stomach men who won't take no." The chapel rang with silence, sharp as drawn steel. Clay swayed, blood soaking his sleeve, but he kept his Colt steady. Belle's gaze swept the room and caught on a hanging oil lamp near Hollis. One shot could change everything. She fired. Flame blossomed across the doorway, forcing Hollis to leap back with a startled curse. In that breath of distraction, she raced to Clay, catching him as he sagged. "I've got you," she whispered, feeling his blood hot against her hands. "Behind you," Rose shouted. Belle spun. Finn Red stood 10 paces away, gun leveled at her heart. Time slowed to a cold, perfect instant. She saw death in his eyes and knew she couldn't move fast enough. The report of a pistol cracked the air. Finn jerked eyes wide, then crumpled a crimson bloom spreading across his chest. Behind him stood Jed Pike, the ranch hand who'd first helped her escape. He lowered his smoking revolver. "Told you Hollis was the devil," he said evenly. "Came to warn you, but looks like I'm late to the dance." Now only Gage Hollis remained, framed by fire, and ruin his men dead or gone. His face twisted in disbelief and fury. "You'll hang for this," he bellowed. "Every last one of you. I've got influence money. You think a pack of saloon girls and a half-dead drifter can stand against me? No," came a new steady voice from the scorched doorway. "But the law can." Judge Eli Frost stepped inside, flanked by 2 federal marshals, their badges catching the firelight. The gray-haired judge surveyed the wreckage, then fixed his stern eyes on Hollis. "Gage Hollis, you're under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy and for violating the territory's anti-slavery statutes. Buying a woman like chattel's been illegal near 20 years. You can't. She was payment for a debt. I've got rights. You've got the right to a fair trial," one marshal said, snapping irons on his wrists. "But don't expect mercy." They dragged Hollis out, still cursing about money and power. Belle's knees buckled as the adrenaline drained away. She cradled Clay's head in her lap, pressing her palms to the bleeding wound. "Stay with me," she begged. "Don't you dare leave me now, Clay Boone. Not when we're this close." His eyes fluttered open, faint but focused. "Not going anywhere," he rasped. "Still got an ocean to show you." Rose was already shouting orders, sending her girls for Doc Rufus Lane and fresh bandages. Jed crouched beside them, his face sober. "He's strong," he said quietly. "I've seen men live through worse." But Belle felt the precious heat of his life seeping out beneath her hands. Tears slid down her cheeks, falling on his face. "You saved me," she whispered. "From the desert, from Hollis, from myself. Let me save you now. Fight, Clay. Please fight." Doc Lane burst in with his kit, moving with brisk, practiced hands. They carried Clay to Rose's establishment, the closest thing Fort Defiance had to a hospital. Belle never left his side, gripping his hand, while the doctor probed and stitched. Hours blurred in a haze of laudanum and whispered prayers. Rose's women brought water and clean clothes. Jed kept guard at the door. Federal marshals gathered statements, piecing together the night's violence. At last, Doc Lane straightened, wiping his bloody hands on a towel. "He'll live," he declared. "Bullet missed the vitals. He's lost blood, but with rest, he'll heal." Belle let out a sob of relief and pressed a kiss to Clay's damp brow. One by one, their helpers drifted away, Rose to check on the scorched chapel, Jed to find a stiff drink, the doctor to other patients, until only Belle remained watching over the man who had become her whole world in a handful of desperate days. When dawn spilled through the windows, Clay's eyes opened clearer than she'd dared hope. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey yourself." She brushed the hair from his forehead, still trembling. "You scared me half to death." "Sorry," he murmured, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Didn't mean to get shot on our wedding day." Belle Hart laughed through tears that still shone on her cheeks. "We never did reach Judge Frost. He's probably knee-deep in dealing with Hollis anyway." Claybourne's fingers found hers, squeezing with a strength that belied the pallor in his face. "Belle, what you pulled off in that chapel, pure grit. You were magnificent." "I was terrified," she admitted. He gave a faint, crooked smile. "That's where real courage lives, in the middle of fear. You faced down 6 gunmen and Gage Hollis himself. Saved my hide. You saved mine more times than I can count. Then we'll call it even," he said, eyes warming. "Good foundation for a marriage trading rescues." A quiet knock sounded, and Judge Eli Frost stepped in, travel-weary but smiling. "Hollis is locked up tight," he reported. "Marshal Zane Porter and his men will take him to Tucson for trial. With the evidence we've got, he'll spend a long spell breaking rocks for the territory. It's over." Belle stared, hardly daring to breathe. "Truly over." "Truly," the judge said with a dry nod. Then a twinkle lit his stern eyes. "Though I hear a wedding was on the docket. Shame to waste everyone's time. And so in a room scented with laudanum and smoke, with morning light spilling through lace curtains, Belle Hart became Belle Boone. Rose Carver stood as witness Jed Pike as best man. Clay remained propped against pillows, too weak to stand, but his voice rang steady as he spoke his vows. "I promise to love you in desert heat and mountain rain," he said, gaze locked on hers. "To stand beside you through every storm, to show you the ocean and help you plant your garden, to be your shelter when you need one and your freedom when you don't, till death parts us." Belle's answer came straight from her soul. "I promise to choose you every day, to trust the kindness in you, and share in your strength to build a life on love, not fear. To walk beside you in all things till death parts us." Judge Frost pronounced them man and wife, and their kiss tasted of tears' triumph, and the iron tang of a fight survived a fitting beginning for two who had found love in the shadow of violence. Later, as Clay slept and Belle kept vigil, she traced the new band on his hand, then her own. They had gained more than survival in that blood-stained chapel. They had claimed a future no past could steal. Hollis would rot in prison. The desert had tested them and found them worthy. Somewhere west, the ocean waited vast, patient, and free. 6 months later, dawn gilded their Pacific hillside in soft gold. Belle stood atop a grassy rise, overlooking their modest ranch, watching horses graze where sea breezes carried the salt of distant waves, just as Clay had promised. "Coffee's ready," came his easy drawl. She turned to see him striding up shoulder-heeled enough to hide its ache. He carried 2 steaming mugs and the quiet joy that had replaced old shadows. "You're up early," he teased, handing her a cup. "Couldn't sleep too excited for today." She smiled as he slipped an arm around her. "Our first real harvest. Who'd have thought a desert flower would take to ranch life?" "You're more than that," Clay said against her hair. "You're a rancher, a horse trainer, and if Mrs. Patterson in town is right, the best pie maker in 3 counties. Belle laughed. "She's generous. My crust still needs practice. Everything you make is perfect to me." They stood in easy silence as the land awoke. Their spread wasn't grand, just 40 honest acres, with a snug house, a barn, and dreams wide as the sky. But it was theirs bought with sweat and hope, never fear. Belle grazed nearby coat glossy and sound, a living emblem of all they'd endured. "I got a letter yesterday," Clay said carefully. Belle stiffened. Letters from the past seldom brought simple news. From Jed. He nodded. Buck Crow drank himself to death. The old ranch is being sold to cover debts. Jed saved what he could, wants to know if you'd like anything. Says he's set aside your mother's Bible. Belle weighed the news. The man who once tried to sell her like stock was gone. She felt no triumph, only a distant sorrow for so much wasted life. "Tell him thank you," she said softly, "and ask him to send Mama's Bible if it's safe." Clay kissed her temple. "You all right?" "Yes," she answered, and meant it. That life feels like it belonged to someone else. Hand in hand, they walked back to the house they'd built with neighbors' help, sunlight filling every window she'd insisted on to banish old darkness. As Belle set about breakfast, Clay spoke of the day's work harvesting the rest of the corn, mending a fence the wild pigs had broken, checking the garden. Simple chores, but she cherished each one. This was the life she had fought for, building something lasting season by season. "Oh," Clay said suddenly, a grin breaking across his face. "Almost forgot. Close your eyes." Belle obeyed, smiling. She felt him lead her outside, heard the soft crunch of gravel beneath their boots. "All right, open," she gasped. Before her stretched a neat plot already sown with roses and lavender, a small bench placed to catch the morning sun. A wooden sign read, "Belle's Garden Where Love Grows." Clay. Her throat tightened as she threw her arms around his neck. "It's beautiful. You said you dreamed of a garden by the ocean," he murmured, holding her close. "Took me a while, but I keep my promises." "Yes, you do." She kissed him long and deep, the Pacific wind carrying their laughter. When at last they parted, breathless, she whispered, "We have work waiting." Clay's eyes danced. "Work can wait an hour." Clay Boone grinned, scooping Belle Hart into his arms and carrying her back inside her, laughter spilling into the salt-rich breeze. Later, working shoulder to shoulder in the cornfield, Belle let her thoughts drift over the hard trail that had led them here. Some nights she still startled awake, heart pounding, half expecting the barren desert and the chase that once defined her life. But then Clay's arm would tighten around her, his quiet murmur grounding her until the fear eased. News had reached them that Gage Hollis was indeed serving a 10-year stretch at hard labor. Rose Carver had written to say Fort Defiance had returned to its familiar watchful calm. Judge Eli Frost had even sent a proper marriage certificate to replace the hurried scrawl from that blood-stained morning. Yet most of that world felt distant now. Out here, they were simply another young couple carving out a future on the rugged edge of the Pacific. Their neighbors knew pieces of the story, Clay's battle scar, the way Belle sometimes flinched at sudden noises, but frontier folks understood that every soul carried history. What mattered was the life you built from this day forward. By midday, they rested in the shade of an old oak. Belle unwrapped bread cheese and the first crisp apples from their lone tree. They ate in easy silence, shoulders touching, as clouds drifted over the endless sky. "No regrets?" Clay asked the familiar phrase now, a private smile between them. Only one Belle answered with mock gravity. Concern flickered across his face until she added, "That it took so long to find you. Think of all the years we could have shared." "We have them now," he said, eyes steady. "All the years ahead." "Yes," she agreed softly. "We do." As the afternoon wore on, they finished their chores. Belle found herself humming a habit she'd thought Amos Hart had beaten out of her music, slowly seeping back like rain into parched earth. When evening fell, they walked to the cliff's edge where their land met the wide Pacific. This nightly ritual never lost its wonder. Some days the sea lay calm and blue. Other times it thundered with storms, but it was always there, vast and free. I once thought freedom meant standing alone, Belle said, the wind teasing strands of hair across her face. Never needing anyone, never risking your heart. And now clay asked fingers intertwining with hers until their wedding bands caught the fading light. Now I know real freedom is choosing who to trust. It's daring to be vulnerable with someone who'll never turn it against you. Clay pulled her close as the horizon burned with impossible color. Behind them stood the home and fields they had built on respect and shared labor. Before them stretched an ocean of unending promise. "I love you, Belle Boone," he said, as he did every evening. "And I love you, Clay Boone," she replied, completing their nightly vow. Stars began to prick the darkening sky. There would be supper to cook animals, to check plans to lay for tomorrow. But for now they lingered, walking back hand in hand, two souls who had crossed a wilderness of danger and heartbreak, only to find the greatest adventure was building a life together. The ocean breeze followed them home, fragrant with salt and new beginnings. Belle smiled, certain that each sunrise would bring another day of the life she had once believed impossible, a life freely chosen and deeply shared, with love as gentle as dawn rain and as steadfast as the earth beneath their feet. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate. The sound no longer stirred fear, only a quiet recognition of belonging in this vast chorus of the frontier, where broken hearts mend and second chances bloom like wildflowers after a storm. They were home. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you